Welcome to our latest webinar, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Phil Underwood. I'm the Engagement Manager here at the Society for the Environment. I'm going to be handing over to our expert speakers from HS2 very shortly, and I'll pop back again to conclude the webinar with a question and answer opportunity. For those watching the webinar as a recording, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at any time using the contact details on your screen. So very quickly, you're watching a Society for the Environment webinar. We hold a Royal Charter, which was awarded in 2004. This allows us to register environmental professionals as Chartered Environmentalists and Registered Environmental Technicians. This is the third part of our expert-led series of webinars. These series are designed to provide perspectives from across the wide range of the spectrum of our Chartered Environmentalists and Registered Environmental Technicians and the areas that they cover. This is to increase the knowledge transfer opportunities for environmental professionals and other interested parties. This is the last of a three-part series based around the topic of a sustainable built environment. Today we are focusing on the environmental considerations of the major infrastructure project that is HS2, also known as High Speed 2. To provide some expert insight, we are delighted to be joined by Chartered Environmentalists Vaughn and Mark Fenton. For the recording of this webinar, i.e. the video that you're watching now, you will have noticed that we have split the webinar into two. This is video number 2 from the webinar. Mark's section on the carbon management within the HS2 project is available on the first video. Mark's section is linked to in the description on YouTube and at the end of this video. Or you can also simply find it on our YouTube channel or on our website. Next up is Vaughn Redfern, Principal Environmental Consultant at Atkinson HS2 and a Chartered Environmentalist registered via the Institution of Agricultural Engineers, or IAGRE. Vaughn is a soil specialist and will focus his talk today on the role of soils in sustainable construction and the strategies applied within the HS2 project. So welcome, Vaughn. Are you all set and ready to go?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. So good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so I'm Vaughn Redfern. I work as a principal environmental consultant with Atkins, and I've been seconded to work on HS2 for the last 4 years. I'm the agriculture and soils lead on phase 1 of the project. But part of my job is ensuring that contractors understand what HS2 requires in terms of handling soils, and that their methods and design will meet those requirements with the overall aim of ensuring sustainable use of soils. In this webinar, I'm going to try to explain the importance of looking after soil on a large infrastructure project like HS2 and how this contributes to sustainable construction. If we start off by thinking about why we should be concerned about soils, and we can look at this in terms of ecosystem services, that is, the benefits humans derive from the natural environment. Healthy soils provide many benefits in terms of provisioning. They provide the habitat for soil fauna, an environment for the growth of crops, and they contain genetic resources that provide biological and medical products. Soils have a regulating function, for example, filtering and buffering water to provide drinking water and regulating hydrological flow. And they help to regulate atmospheric gases that affect climate, for example, CO2. They store, cite and process nutrients, for example, nitrogen fixation, and they provide physical support for plants. They also have a cultural function, for example, providing a platform for facilities such as sports fields and preserving archaeological features. Soil is a complex entity, and it's that complexity that enables them to provide a wide range of functions. The soil environment contains physical, chemical, and biological aspects, and it's dynamic, that is, it's constantly changing. A typical soil profile comprises horizons that develop over time, and this is as a result of physical weathering and chemical and biological processes. Generally speaking, the A horizon is what we think of as the topsoil and contains the highest levels of organic matter and nutrients and has the most amount of biological activity. The B horizon, whilst it contains fewer nutrients and organic matter, is important for holding water that's available to plants, and it provides anchorage for plant roots. And the C horizon is the weathered parent material from which the soil is formed. Construction will displace a large volume of agricultural soils. Where land is being reinstated back to agriculture, then it's important that the original soil profile is reinstated and that the land is restored to its original quality. In other areas, the proper handling of soils will enable their reuse for landscape planting and ecological mitigation. And this all contributes to the sustainable use of soils. The sustainability of a soil is influenced by the life in the soil, as shown in this slide here, which demonstrates the range of life that can be found within and on top of the soil, from bacteria to fungi to worms and moles. All these things have a home in the soil. And living creatures, just like humans, need water and air and space to live. And these are the requirements of a healthy soil. A healthy soil will have a good structure, sufficient moisture and drainage, and a supply of organic matter. And this slide is a simplified view of the relationships between various organisms and their dependencies. If part of the web is broken, then it stops functioning. And good soil management is required to provide the environment that enables this web to function. On a construction project like HS2, this requires a knowledge of the soils that are to be disturbed and a strategy for handling and restoring the soils to restore soil health as quickly as possible. And this will result in their sustainable reuse. So during construction of HS2, we're going to be moving millions of tons of soil, and these will be stripped and stored before eventually being reused. However, machinery is heavy and will cause a lot of disturbance to the soil. Soils will be stored in stockpiles, where it will remain for a period of time ranging from perhaps a few weeks to a few years. Now, when a machine moves over the soil, its wheels or tracks exert a downward pressure, and this pressure squashes or compacts the soil. The wetter the soil, the deeper the compaction, because if soils are wet, the soil particles lose their strength and are more easily compacted. So think about squeezing a lump of dry soil in your hand. It has some initial resistance, and then it breaks up into a lot of small particles. If the soil is wet, though, it squashes together quite easily. The pressure exerted by machinery can be reduced by using wider tyres or caterpillar tracks, but generally it's important to handle soils when they are reasonably dry and therefore have more strength. If that's not possible, for example because of prolonged wet weather, such as we've experienced recently, then particular techniques need to be used to remediate the soils to make it fit for reuse. Soils consist of solid particles arranged into more or less structured aggregates. The spaces between the aggregates are called pores, and this is where air and water is held within the soil. The size and distribution of pores determines the amount of water and air held in the soil and how available that water is to plant roots and soil organisms. These pores also provide the habitats for soil organisms and allow plant roots to penetrate the soil. And plant roots need to be able to get into the soil to access water and nutrients. If the soil particles are squashed together, such as seen in that right-hand diagram, it reduces the volume of air spaces and makes it difficult for soil organisms and roots to move and for water to drain away. This can end up with the soil becoming saturated, and where there's no air available for soil organisms, including roots, and eventually developing anaerobic conditions. This can happen when machinery runs over the soil, and it also occurs when the soil is stockpiled due to the weight of the soils pressing down on soil stored. The way we manage soils is a key aspect of the sustainable construction of HS2. We want, wherever possible, for there to be no loss of soils from the project, and for soils to be used to reinstate land to agriculture and to enable landscape planting and ecological mitigation. Key to this are two documents, the Soil Technical Standard and the Specification for Civil Engineering Works. And these are internal documents developed by HS2, but drawing on industry best practice, such as DEFRA's Construction Code of Practice. These documents provide guidance on how to handle and restore soils. And in order to manage something, though, you need to have information about it. So HS2 commissioned soil surveys to give us information about what soils we have along the route. And the instructions for undertaking soil surveys are contained in the technical standard. This soil survey information is stored in HS2's GIS system and is provided to the contractor in GIS format. Together, the technical standard and the specification, plus GIS information, provide the contractors with the information they need for handling soils during design and construction. Soil surveys are carried out along the route by specialist soil surveyors using handheld augers. And the surveys provide us with information on characteristics such as soil texture and soil nutrients. The information gathered assists in planning soil handling and storage, also the design of landscape planting and ecological mitigation, as well as the restoration of agricultural land to its original quality. So this slide is an extract from HS2's GIS system, known as GViewer. The dots show the location of borings at different survey dates. The blue areas are where land will be either returned to agriculture or be used for landscape planting, and the orange areas will be used for landscape planting. In GIS, the information associated with each of the borings can be displayed and exported in various formats. One of the ways in which the contractors will use soil data will be to produce soil resource plans. In the soil resource plan, soils are grouped into handling units according to texture. The green units here are soils with lighter textures that are less susceptible to damage during handling, and the brown areas are heavy textured soils such as clays. And these plans enable calculation of soil volumes and the planning of soil stripping and storage. And this plan here shows the textures and depth of topsoil, and additional plans are produced for subsoil. Soil data also enables the determination of the quality of the agricultural land. Known as agricultural land classification, it provides a pre-construction audit of land quality and a target specification for land that is to be returned to agriculture. The aim is to reinstate a soil profile that is similar to the original in terms of physical properties. This helps HS2 to minimize the loss of agricultural land and ensure there is no loss of quality in the land being restored. On this plan, the green area is grade 3A and the blue is grade 2. Our aim is good soil management throughout the construction of HS2, leading to sustainable reuse of soils. The key to this is good planning. This requires a knowledge of the soils, and that in turn enables appropriate handling during stripping, storage, and restoration. I've got a couple of examples from other projects, I hasten to add, of poor soil management. And these are the sort of things that we want to avoid. In this example, we've got stockpiled agricultural soils mixed with construction waste. So it's difficult to reuse these soils, with a potential shortage of soils for reinstatement of agricultural land. It's also a loss of a valuable resource and could result in additional cost to the project. The second example is a landscaped area constructed as part of a car park extension at a shopping outlet. Obviously here the soils have been compacted, possibly because they were moved without appropriate management, and it's resulted in waterlogging. So the soils are not fit for their intended use. There's been trees planted there, which are obviously at a cost. Those trees are not likely to survive in the saturated soils, as their roots will be in an anaerobic environment. And remediation will be required, which is a further cost to the project. This is the key message that I would like you to take away, that handling soils with care will enable a range of disciplines to achieve their objectives and help avoid additional costs from extended periods of aftercare and remediation works, which overall will contribute to sustainable construction. So I'll hand you back to Phil.
Thank you very much, Vaughn. Excellent stuff. And another huge thank you to Mark as well for your talk a few moments ago. For everyone watching, stick around. Now's the time for questions and answers. So this one's probably directed at Vaughn. Do you use bioremediation technology to speed up the remediation of affected soils? Which products are used and how effective? I don't know how much detail you can go into that, but
okay, thanks. We don't specify the use of bioremediation. That's generally used in the remediation of contaminated land. So it's more the sort of thing that my colleagues in land quality would deal with. HS2 is the client and principal designer, and as such then we provide a framework within which the contractors produce their detailed design. So we want the contractors to restore land to the intended end use, so bringing back agricultural land to its original quality, or ensuring that soils are capable of landscape planting or ecological mitigation. So how they do that and the techniques they use is really up to the contractors, but following the general guidance that we provide. So at the moment, there's no bioremediation involved in agricultural landscape or ecological works, but potentially it's being used in land quality works. Interesting
stuff. The next question we had in was probably directed at Mark, but we'll see. How to value the carbon biomass accumulation of trees? That's the question. There might be a word missing.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've used the woodland carbon codes in the past, specifically for tree planting. So that sets out a methodology. More broadly, we've looked at the entire, so not just the tree planting, but all of our land use change and forestry impacts. So there's a international inventory that can be applied there. The BRE also established a sort of process for determining carbon impacts from land use change as well. And we've also looked at the peatland code, obviously specifically for peatland habitats. So there's a range of methodologies out there, and we're currently looking at how we can best quantify our route-wide land use change carbon impacts at the moment.
So there's a few things out there that it can be used, and you're looking at all those different options and
yeah,
going with the best practice that you can find. Okay. Yeah. Next question we had in is it's probably quite a big question, but can large infrastructure ever be sustainable? Who wants to take that one?
Well, maybe I'll start. I mean, so our objective is to build the most sustainable high-speed railway of its kind in the world. So that's an objective that we've articulated. Then it's what myself and colleagues in the rest of the environment and sustainability teams are striving to deliver. Sustainability covers a number of facets, and everybody's interpretation of sustainability will no doubt be slightly different. But ultimately, when you look at the world of net gain and all of the climate positive agenda, that's the direction of travel that infrastructure is going to have to go to. And things like the circular economy, trying to maximize the utilization and value of all of those products and infrastructure. And again, the sort of natural capital agenda that's happening and that infrastructure needs to fit within as well.
Okay, anything to add from you, Vaughn?
Not really, without repeating things that Mark said. Okay. Obviously, laying miles and miles of concrete slab to build the railway on in itself is not sustainable, but our efforts to offset that through things like the Green Corridor, which will provide virtually uninterrupted habitat, a varied habitat, and interconnectivity with habitats adjacent to the railway, are means of trying to improve or enhance the sustainability. So I think what we're trying to do is reduce the environmental impact of the project and enhance the environment wherever we can.
I'm interested by the Green Corridor. Is that a certain area, or is that the length of the railway? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's essentially the entire route. We're trying to leave a legacy of a better connected, more biodiverse, greater tree canopy than what was there previously. So this point about trying to add value to the natural environment.
I'd just add to that, if obviously HS2 is digging a plot of agricultural land, which people see as green space. Agricultural land is not necessarily particularly biodiverse. The Green Corridor, excuse me, through having a varied type of vegetation and will have a greater biodiversity, it also provides a connectivity for wildlife to move between different types of habitat.
Okay. So we're going to move on to questions that have been asked live using the Q&A function. So I believe this first one links to a section of Mark's presentation around CEO buy-in. So the question is the same CEO buy-in reflected for other impacts, for example, biodiversity and ecological impact? Hopefully, Mark, you remember where that question comes from.
Yeah. So the climate emergency and the biodiversity emergency are certainly high up on the CEO and the board's agenda. So next week, myself and a colleague on the leads on our Green Corridor work is presenting to the exec on the work that we are delivering, the objectives, why it's important, and that was at their request. So yeah, so in terms of the climate emergency and the biodiversity emergency, it's definitely up there on the senior leadership and executive leadership team's agenda.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Do you consider material embodied energy when procuring the construction materials?
Yeah, so in the pie charts that I showed, we're considering a whole life impact, so cradle to grave, whatever you want to call it. But yes, we look at what materials are we using? Let's reduce the quantity. Where do they come from? And how are they produced? So the extraction, the manufacture, the transport to site. So that is where our biggest carbon impact is in the materials that we're purchasing, particularly the cement in concrete. And we have, as I showed, millions of tons of concrete that we'll be consuming, and also steel as well. So those are the two key areas that we're spending time and effort to minimize the emissions from the manufacture and production of those products.
And with that in mind, you may have mentioned it already, actually. What are the tools or the software that you use for calculating the emissions levels of the construction materials?
Yeah, so we're using eTool, which is a life cycle assessment software platform, and we're cascading that into our supply chain. The station contractors, design service contractors, they've been using one-click LCA, so that's another tool that's available. I mentioned that we've worked with the RSSB to produce the rail carbon tool, so that's another carbon-focused tool that can be used. But we're also working with the supply chain to try and increase the prevalence of environmental product declarations. So those are the certificates, if you like, that the product suppliers produce. So the likes of Tarmac have them available for all of their concrete mixes, and that's ultimately where the best, most reliable data exists. So we want to try and get the supply chain and the product suppliers specifically in providing environmental product declarations to support any of their claims of carbon reduction.
Right, makes sense. Okay. A question for Vaughn, I think. How are you overcoming ecological preferences to bury topsoil and leave low fertility subsoil at the surface?
Yeah, that is something that is happening in certain areas in the creation of things like calcareous grassland. If the soils had been stripped in the first place, then topsoil would not be replaced. And I know there's been discussion about inverting soils in some areas, so effectively burying the topsoil and bringing the nutrient poor subsoil to the surface. We are looking at a research project at the moment with regards to the creation of calcareous grassland at the portal to the Chilterns Tunnel. The construction of the Chilterns Tunnel will result in a huge quantity of chalk cake being pulled out of the tunnel, and we need to dispose of that somehow. So we're looking at, the intention is that material will be used fairly close to its origin around the portal, and using it as a substrate to create calcareous grassland, putting subsoils over the top of that. And we're currently investigating a research project with Cranfield University to look at that.
Okay, I'm going to move straight on to the next questions, which is, again, it's another soil-based question. So one for you, Vaughn. Does aiming to achieve equal soil or ecological conditions to the baseline mean that the outcome is most likely in a reduced condition?
Well, in terms of agricultural soils, what we're trying to do is get the land back to its original quality. So that's in terms of its agricultural land classification. Elsewhere, we are creating sites for landscape planting and ecological mitigation. So the baseline in most of those instances would have been agricultural land. So from a landscape or ecological point of view, it would be an improvement above that original baseline. But for agricultural restoration, we are trying to maintain that baseline quality.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question nicely. Will all soils be reused as part of the construction, or will some require off-site management? And if off-site, how will this occur?
No, we won't be able to reuse all the soils on site, particularly because a lot of the track is going to be in cutting. We will try to use soils wherever possible, or rather, the contractors will try to use the soils wherever possible in their design, creating embankments. And in order to try and reduce the loss of agricultural land, or the quality of agricultural land, one of the factors is gradient. So where you've got a cutting, the outward facing embankment, we want it to be constructed at a gradient sufficient or such that it doesn't exceed the limits for the particular agricultural land classification that it was prior to construction. I'm not sure if that's entirely clear, but basically we don't want steep slopes on our outward facing embankments. So soils will be used, the soils that have been dug out from the cutting will be used to help bring up the gradient of those embankments. Right. But there will be surplus soils, and that's actually a problem for the contractors. There are construction projects elsewhere and landscaping projects where soils can be used, but certainly topsoil in particular is a valuable resource, and we want to try and reuse as much of it as we can within the project.
Okay, so the last question, which does link on to that question, I believe. Are the soils which will be reused in landscaping or agriculture are they classed as waste? And if so, is there an environmental permitting regime in place to cover all or part of the scheme?
It's a two-part question. If the soils are being reused, actually sort of a bit dodgy ground here, because it's not really my area.
We'll avoid dodgy
we
ground.
have dodgy ground. We have Mark might be able to talk more about this, about the Clare agreement that we have with regards to waste generated within the project, but soils that are generated from within the project and utilised within the project are not regarded as waste. Although I can't say that categorically, but to the best of my knowledge, they are not regarded as waste.
Okay, no problem at all. So that brings us to the end of the question and answers. Once again, a huge thank you to Mark and Vaughn for spending some time with us today and providing two very insightful talks for us to learn from. That isn't quite the end of the webinar just yet. Please stay tuned for just a minute longer. There might be some opportunities that will interest you somewhat. We shall see. First of all, our next series of webinars is on the topic of climate change, a 2020 perspective, and we are looking for Chartered Environmentalist and Registered Environmental Technician speakers for the webinar. You'll be joining Chartered Environmentalists already confirmed, who will be covering subtopics, including the role of forestry, the importance of professionalism, and the link between materials, resources, and climate change. So if you have a project that you would like to showcase and allow other environmental professionals to learn from, if you have some top tips that other sectors should consider in their work, or guidance on how you have implemented relevant standards and frameworks, please do get in touch with me. You saw my details at the start of the webinar. If you're interested to hear more about becoming a Chartered Environmentalist or RF Tech, please look at our How to Become and Why Become recorded webinars, which are on our website. You'll also find a recording of parts 1 and 2 of this A Sustainable Built Environment webinar series on there now, which will be joined by this recording of this webinar very shortly. They're also available via our YouTube channel, so just type in Society of the Environment, you should be able to find us, and you can subscribe and gain notifications of new webinar recordings and various other CEnv content. Right, this one's quite exciting as well. Each year we celebrate World Environment Day by sharing environmental good practice across sectors, inspiring action, and showcasing achievements with a brilliant awards and lectures event. This year we're doing this slightly differently. We're running 3 expert-led streams to form our annual awards and lectures, and that's to tie into the 2020 MEMCOM conference as event partners, and we'll be forming the MEMCOM Sustainability Summit. So that's what we're going to be running. It's a very exciting event, bringing together environmental professionals and the membership community to share knowledge and provide leadership across sectors. The event will have a special sustainability theme running through it. That's going through the entire event, not just the sustainability streams, but also across the entire MEMCOM event. And we're looking for speakers to provide inspiration, advice, guidance, and support for the delegates to make a difference. We're looking for speakers, facilitators, discussion leads, keynote talk providers, for the 3 streams of biodiversity, getting to net zero, and managing resource materials and waste. The biodiversity stream links directly to the biodiversity global theme for World Environment Day 2020, set by UN Environment. This stream is designed to share in-depth knowledge and up-to-date challenges and theories around the topic to an audience of environmental professionals and key sector leaders within those membership organisations and charities. The net zero and resource and waste streams differ slightly in that we want to provide the insight, guidance and tools for membership organisations and charities and trade associations to make a difference internally and to allow them to become leaders within their sectors. So it's a really important thing that we're trying to do here to provide the information that they need to make a difference across their sectors. The influence in the room that will be there on the day to make a wide difference and to break out of the silos is a great opportunity. So we very much want you to be involved. Again, if you're interested, please get in touch with me. My details were at the start of the webinar. As part of the Sustainability Summit in partnership with MEMCOM, we will also be presenting the highly prestigious 2020 Environmental Professional of the Year Award. We will be opening nominations very shortly. Nominations can be either Chartered Environmentalists or Registered Environmental Technicians, but anyone can make a nomination. So if you are interested in that, please go ahead and look into that. You can also submit a self-nomination. It's very much up to you. That's very much encouraged. Nominations will be judged on the extent to which they have made a difference while demonstrating an outstanding record in the 4 main competencies in the CEnv or RF Tech registrations, as well as a 5th criteria that underlines the exceptional outcomes of their work. So keep an eye out for details. That'll be coming very, very shortly in the next week or so. And please do nominate somebody or yourself. It'll be we'll get some excellent nominations each year, so you'll be in very good company. And that's about it from us today. Thank you very much for listening and taking part, and a big thank you again to Mark and Vaughn. If you're watching this recording on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to gain notifications of new videos. And if you can tap the big thumbs up like button, that would be excellent as well. If you are watching on our website, please click on the YouTube button in the bottom right to get to the subscription and like options. So once again, thank you to our special guests, Mark and Vaughn, and we will see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much for watching.